Hello there ladies and gentlemen, TX141 here, also known as Paul, welcoming you to the second instalment of my War Thunder subscriber spotlight series, today featuring a gameplay from the player Bloody Violin. Violin, as I shall refer to him from this point onwards, is part of the Beast clan, and his gameplay in a MiG-15bis as part of the East German Air Force is going to live up to his clan's reputation forthwith. But before we go any further, let us quickly consider some historical context behind the MiG-15. It was a Russian jet fighter that arrived in 1949, and, by comparison with its main rival in the Korean War, the F-86 Sabre, it was a plane which had a much higher service ceiling of 50,000 feet, by comparison with the Sabre's own altitude ceiling of 40,000 feet. On top of this, the MiG was also armed with two 23mm cannons and a 37mm cannon to boot, by comparison with the Sabre's own 6 12.7mm Browning 50 cals. Meaning that the MiG did have the firepower advantage. And finally, the MiG was able to outturn the Sabre at all but extremely high speeds. Yet in the Sabre's favour, the Sabre did have the better low to medium altitude performance in terms of the altitude ranges that jets would fly in. And it is reputed that at extremely high speeds and at higher altitudes, MiG pilots would sometimes fall unconscious at the helm, or the plane would enter into a flat spin completely of its own design. Now, whether this is due to the fact that pilots flying the MiG-15 did not have access to G-suits, therefore falling unconscious, or whether it was an actual fault with the aircraft's design, I cannot say for certain, but this is something to be considered. Additionally, the internal heating and defrosting mechanics of the MiG-15 were lacking in some respects, meaning that when MiG-15 pilots dive down their Sabre counterparts at lower altitudes, sometimes they would have to do so with obscured windscreens, meaning they didn't always have a clear shot onto target. Nonetheless, with our brief history out the way, let us dive into the action. So over the course of this ground strike game on the map Gorge, Violin is going to reflect upon the strengths and weaknesses of the MiG-15bis both historically and in game. I must apologise immediately for any situations where I cannot discern the aircraft that Violin is shooting at, due to the high convergence rates and the lack of information that the replay system provides, but I hope you all forgive me for this. Nonetheless, minor digression aside, Violin immediately climbs up to roughly 4,500 meters altitude. Whilst the climb rate of the MiG-15bis should be a little bit less by comparison with its Sabre counterparts, he nonetheless knows that having altitude at the start of the game is a key advantage in any given situation. And, looking around for his first target of opportunity, he soon sees a Meteor F coming his way, and at the same time wants to reciprocate this in the form of a head-on. Remember, the two 23mm cannons and one 37mm cannon are crucial for doing devastating damage in a head-on. Yet, he opens fire at approximately 900 meters on the Meteor, scoring no hits, yet the Meteor cannot score any hits on him thanks to the decent roll rate being used to form a snap roll. Then breaking into a head-on with an I-153 Chiker, most likely going for a David medal, he follows through to get a second kill on an F-86 Sabre, showing just how quickly you can pick up the kills if you line up your targets right. Now the Sabre may have been coming out of spawn, but I cannot say that for certain. And, looking around and behind him, Violin notices he's got no opponents chasing him down, at which point he can begin to climb a little bit more, sacrificing his speed, and then leap back into the action thanks to the great turn circle of the MiG-15bis. He's looking around for a target, he's not just trying to leap in on a given individual, and this is a testament straight away to the strategy he's going to use throughout this match. He's going to be picking on targets of opportunity rather than focusing down single players or going for the target nearest to him. The first target is an F-86 Sabre, which you can see in the centre lower portion of your screen heading towards the friendly airfield. Although this Sabre soon is going to run into a Horton Ho 229 head-on, and both planes are going to collide, meaning that Violin is now going to have to look around for another target to make his third kill. He very quickly finds a third target in the form of another F-86 Sabre. It's right below him in the valley at the moment, and it's time to initiate MiG Alley. You can see the Sabre coming up, and his first burst achieves a hit on the oil tank of the Sabre. Yet Violin is going to keep his composure achieving a critical hit on the elevator of the Sabre, meaning the Sabre is now sitting duck for a third and final burst, leading to Violin's third kill. We can see how in short succinct bursts, and with a little bit of patience, Violin picks up the kill quite quickly with the lethality of the armament of this aircraft, and how the manoeuvrability of this plane in terms of its turn circle allowed him to keep on the back of his opponent, who was travelling quite quickly, and picked up on his presence as they were both going around the mountain. He uses the climb rate of the jet here to get away from the flak and break his way up into the cloud layer, before hammerheading around, feeling secure in the clouds to initiate a new pass. We can see quite a mixture of red and blue dots down at lower altitudes, and once again this seems to echo my shock and disappointment of the fact that a good portion of both teams are fighting at incredibly low altitude. Yet, we're not going to dwell on that for too long. And so Violin soon picks up on the fact that any of the targets down low at the moment are quite vulnerable, but at the same time will lead to him being vulnerable when he engages one and another plane from spawn can jump onto his tail. And so he opts to play a more defensive role here, noticing at least 2 enemy fighters hanging around the friendly ground units, and as he breaks around to try and pick on a target here, which is going to be the Focke 190 A5U2, he shortly makes work of the prop, realising that because the prop was in a dead high climb, he could pick it off without much resistance. He then breaks onto the back of an enemy Sabre here, or it may have been a shooting star, I can't tell for certain. He cannot get the shot onto the shooting star at first. Reason being, they went into an Immelmann, and as a result, because Violin does not have the performance to match that at high speeds, i.e. roughly 700 km/h plus, he had to back out and fly along. But it would seem here that a Sabre has decided to carry on towards the friendly airfield, making for a very easy securement of the ace in the day. Nonetheless, Violin is being accurate and not using too much of his ammunition throughout, and so he is going to continue this defensive pattern for the next couple of minutes, as it would seem that both teams are entering the stasis of the mid-game that arrives in any given ground strike match, where nobody wants to leave friendly territory and encroach upon the enemies. Continuing to build up altitude and sacrificing a little bit of speed here, if not building it at a much slower rate, Violin soon breaks around and looks below to try and find another target, realising that there is another enemy fighter in the midst of the valleys. Haven't discerned it yet what it is, but it appears to be another Sabre. His first burst goes wayward, and breaking up high in order to stay behind his foe, he soon comes back down on them as they chase down a friendly fighter. And his second burst goes even further wayward, but his third burst is right on target, knocking the Sabre out for his 6th kill, at which point he receives some fire from behind, most likely from the cannons of what would be an F9F Panther, by the sounds of the 20mm being fired. Violin does not look behind to see what's going on, but instead opts to build up his speed as quickly as possible in the midst of a dive. Reason being, if he can get away from his opponent, he can then look behind and discern what was actually shooting at him. It's a different approach from what I would personally use, but when you're flying this quickly in jets, it's probably the more efficient one. And picking up on the fact there's a MiG-15 right in front of him, chasing down some friendly aircraft as well, he sets the MiG-15 on fire for what will most likely be his 7th kill, and indeed it is. That's very quick thinking and reaction time on Violin's part there, picking on a foe which he had very limited time to judge and make the shot on. And breaking around once again in the cloud layers, feeling a little bit secure here by comparison with being out in the open skies, he's starting to dive through the clouds and pick up speed. A risky approach, especially when you're on a map such as Gorge and the mountains can be in the midst of the clouds, but he soon finds his target right where it is, heading towards the airfield, but he hasn't got the shots because he cannot get the nose down in time in order to hit whatever was flying past. He performs an Immelmann to try and come around once again, and it would appear that his target is an IL-28. Oh sorry, it's an Arado 234B, a mistake, and he picks up his 8th kill with aplomb, showing just how quickly 223s and 137 can rip apart the bombers with their larger wingspans and fuselage nature. At this point he levels out once again and opts to build up some speed and some altitude simultaneously. He's been hanging around at lower altitudes for a bit, so it might be time for a change of practice in order to keep things varied and therefore not be consigned to a lower altitude form of gameplay. Looking around and therefore employing a little bit more spatial awareness than what I would have expected so far, especially with those opening kills, he notices an F9F Panther diving towards lower altitudes. And this is going to highlight one of the key weaknesses of the MiG-15bis that I've picked up on just from this game. Whilst he has the shot, he cannot get the nose round in time when the Panther reacts into a sharp turn. And, going for a second burst here as the Panther follows out, we can see that Violin just cannot get the shot onto target. Partially a little bit of wayward accuracy, and also the limitations of the agility of the MiG-15bis at high speeds. His third burst puts a couple of shots onto target, but they seem to graze and most likely be just a proportion of the 23mm cannon rounds. And so, Violin decides to break off. It's the best option, and it's a smart one, because if he continues to fight and continues to try and turn with the Panther, in the end, even when the lower speed turn circle comes into play, he may just find that an enemy aircraft comes out of spawn and dives on him to make him a quick and easy kill. And so, using his speed here to break away, he soon breaks out into another sharp Immelmann, trying to gain some altitude and therefore come back into the fight. He's got his nose up at this point because he really needs the altitude above all else, and as he looks above, he can see a MiG-9, or what I believe is a MiG-9, diving down behind him and going for the ground targets, fortunately using the cloud layer to shield him, and at the same time going into head-to-head with another jet aircraft that I cannot recognise. However, he picks off this Me-262A1 with aplomb, realising that the 262 was in a very sharp climb, and therefore instead of reacting to those head-ons by turning around, he could pick up a 9th kill very easily. And by coming around after that, he puts himself out of the fight for a little bit, and means that this MiG-9 late does not see him coming for his double ace. So we can see here, whilst turning and going around for another engagement after a head-to-head can be advisable sometimes, in Violin's case, by staying out of the fight and continuing on his chosen path, he's actually picking up more kills than would be normally expected, because his opponents never see him coming, and would not expect to see him coming if he's just had to come out of a head-to-head. And he then goes head-to-head with another enemy aircraft, a Focke-Wulf 90 FA, but the offset of distance, i.e. roughly a kilometre, and the speed of the MiG-15bis means that he's going to be unharmed even if the FA unleashes its 30mm cannon pods. He then goes into a very sharp climb, both to get away from the centre of the map, build some altitude, and try and engage what is an enemy IL-28, I believe, above the airfield. He's prioritising the objective at the same time as building up his kill score here, so it's a sign of a very good player. Very quickly coming up underneath the IL-28, which goes into a dive. He cuts, well sorry, it's a B-17G Flying Fortress, my mistake. He cuts the B-17G to pieces, and we can see that 37mm cannon is all that's really required. And I know why I'm getting confused with the IL-28, as we're about to see. I've had to watch this replay back about 10 times already to actually find out what Violin is shooting at some points. Nonetheless, breaking around here and with his altitude now rebuilt, meaning that he's got a much wider perspective on the battlefield, we can see that Violin is now discerning for an IL-28, setting its left engine on fire, by his perspective, but actually it was its right hand engine, in order to cause the IL-28 to gradually burn out. But instead of going around for the target with its 23mm cannon turrets, he then opts to go for a pass on a Messerschmitt 109 G10, knocking that out for his 12th kill, in a very close range pass, and one with limited burst opportunity, meaning that Violin's employing brilliant accuracy here in order to dispatch his foes. And by using the inertia from that dive, he's able to climb up underneath the IL-28 here, the one I mistook from earlier, to achieve his 13th kill, showing that he is really thinking ahead when going after opponents. And then, levelling out but going into a shallow dive, he's now trying to head back down towards lower altitudes, having broken up to 4,500 metres approximately, in order to stay in the fight with the enemy fighters, as the threat of bombers has been eliminated, although we cannot tell whether Violin is looking at the score sheet here. He comes down towards the enemy spawn and achieves a critical hit on what I believe was either a Focke-Wulf 90D or a MiG-9, cannot tell for certain. This allows him to achieve his 14th kill, which is the limited portion of his burst at an incredibly close range going onto the target. Once again a very well executed pass, and one which nobody probably saw coming. Coming around once again, he's now levelled out at 3,000 metres, trying to gradually drop the altitude cap here and force his opponents to either engage him or have to dive towards lower altitudes. Especially with 14 kills in the bag, he's probably already a player that's built up a reputation that you don't want to mess with him. And seeing this MiG-15 in the distance, he's realising now that he's got two targets, the MiG-15 on your left, which is engaging a friendly bomber, and what is a Focke-Wulf 90 D12 here, who's completely oblivious to his presence for his triple ace. He then opens fire on this MiG-15bis that is continuing to chase down one of his friendlies for his 16th kill. Very well played, and then he opts to jump onto the back of an ME-163B Comet. The Comet is incredibly fast, and so instead he goes for a pass on this enemy Spitfire down at the airfield. So this enemy Tempest down on the airfield, achieving his 17th kill. The Tempest was in a very low state, and Violin only had to use a limited portion of his firepower to achieve the kill, once again making the most of his armament and the accuracy that he holds as a player. With 17 kills in the bag now, how many more can we add to the tally, especially with only approximately 3.5 minutes to go in this game? The answer? Quite a few more. In we're moving now, and now that the player base has thinned out on both teams, but in the majority of the enemy team, it means that Violin can now start to be a little bit more aggressive and continue to fly at lower altitudes. He opts to try and force a head-to-head here with an F-84, but instead the F-84 opts to break out of it, being set on fire by Violin. It's a very good call there, with the F-84 chickening out of the pass, and then he breaks up into a head-to-head with a potential foe. It was I can't tell what it was, but I believe it was an enemy attacker, and he got the kill in the head-on nonetheless for his 19th. It was a B7A2, it may have been one of those, or an R2Y2. He then goes for another head-on here with a MiG-15, achieving a grazing hit, but not one to get the kill. And so he uses his turn circle here as the MiG-15 tries to break around and go underneath him in order to go for his 20th kill. The MiG-15 is being harassed by a friendly F9F, and the fellow Panther gets the kill, so well played to him. So Violin is going to continue on the warpath and go for another kill. He attempts a shot at a MiG-9, but he cannot get the shot because the MiG-9 is breaking up too sharply, and also has been taken out by one of Violin's friendlies. At this point, having regained some altitude due to the flexibility of those dogfights, he's now up at an altitude of 3,400 meters and descending. And at this point it becomes an instance of pretty much going for targets at the enemy spawn. Now there's going to be some debate in the comments section most likely about these last kills, but going into a head-to-head here with another fighter which I can't quite discern, he misses the majority of his burst, but again plays the safe snap roll to avoid taking any return fire. And another pass on what was most likely a prop-based fighter there does not prove successful. Comes around, and the fighter from earlier in that first head-on was the F-86F, which has just died in the centre of your screen. He sees another enemy fighter here, Focke 190 A5U2, coming either out of spawn or levelled out just from spawn, and achieves his 20th kill, meaning that this is now a quadruple ace in a day. He then breaks around very sharply on both the rudder and the overall elevator controls in order to try and get a shot on an enemy F-8F-1 Bearcat, but he is quickly dispatched by a friendly player. And at this point it really is a case of harassing the enemy planes as soon as they come out of the spawn point. And as I say, there will be some debate in the comment section here, but this is more a limitation of both the map and the one-sidedness now of this match as it swings in the favour of Violin's team. He picks off what is a P80 shooting star here for his 21st kill as it tries to dive away from its spawn point to safety, but it proves to be a negative effect. And coming around here to try and pick on an enemy fighter, chasing down one of the friendly fighters on Violin's team, he notices through the cloud layers targets coming in very quickly and being pursued by three friendlies, and it turns out to be a Bearcat. So using his 23mm cannons first to soften up the target, he then brings in the 37mm cannon to achieve kill 22, before opening fire on a B-17G Flying Fortress which seems to have broken into a stall for his 23rd kill. Great awareness and great accuracy on the move here, meaning that Violin has just secured a 23-0 gameplay. And that's all she wrote, ladies and gentlemen, and that's why he lives up to his name as a beast. So, without further ado, let us take a look at the post-game stat screens and give a quick review of the gameplay. Starting with the positives, Violin clearly shows an understanding of the flight characteristics of the MiG-15bis to a very high standard. Throughout this gameplay he used the overall manoeuvrability, climb rate performance and agility of the MiG-15 in order to continually stay in the fight with his opponents where he had the room to manoeuvre, and at the same time break away when he felt threatened or as though the situation was not playing to his advantage. And we should really draw attention to the dogfight with the F9F, whereby whilst coming in at too high a speed at first, Violin soon cut his speed down and put himself in position for a couple of clear shots. Now, whilst he was not successful at taking the F9F down, he still decided, very smartly, to break away after the 4th burst because he knew that if he decided to turn, yes, he may have got the kill on the F9F, but at the same time he would have been a sitting duck for any enemy jets coming fresh out of spawn. It is this awareness towards the middle and the end of the game which should also be considered as a very good trait, and Violin's tendency towards head-ons. Now, head-on passes are always risky because it gives a 50-50 position to both pilots. Yet, by opening fire at a kilometre and for a very brief period of time, Violin maximised the efficiency with which he could dispatch his opponents, especially those in prop-based engine aircraft, at the same time dodging out the way of any incoming fire and minimising the risk to his own airframe. And finally, we have to consider the fact that Violin showed a very clear understanding of the changing nature of the battlefield. We saw for about 75% of this game that Violin hunted down fighters with a rather vehement nature. Yet, when it was required of him, he decided to climb very sharply after B-17Gs and IL-28s, knocking them out of the game and making sure that the game stayed on until the very end and that his team could secure the victory. And so this is once again an appraisal of his spatial awareness and also his objective awareness for the game. But then again, there are always areas of improvement, and the only one I can really find in this game is in terms of the spatial awareness employed within the opening 5 to 6 minutes of the match, especially by comparison with the rest of the game. Violin's spatial awareness only seemed to pick up at about the 7-minute mark, and if it was employed in a little bit more of a higher state towards the start of the game, some additional kills could have been racked into that impressive 23-for-0 kill count. There were no major risky situations in this match, bar perhaps the dive down the F-86 Sabre for his 4th kill, whereby he was shot at rather indiscriminately by the 20mm cannons of an American jet or prop fighter for a short period of time. Yet these rounds were rather sprayed rather than accurately displayed onto his aircraft, and so Violin was not at risk at any point. The only other area of improvement perhaps would be accuracy. There were some instances, such as on the F9F Panther, where there was a clear shot provided, but the rounds just didn't go onto the target. But I cannot really comment on this due to my lack of experience with jet fighter games. And so, as I say, the only real improvement I can suggest would be spatial awareness. If you can maintain a higher state all the way through the game, Violin, you may just find you will pick up even more kills to what was an absolutely monstrous tally nonetheless. And so it is with great pleasure that I would like to say thank you for submitting this bloody Violin. You are truly a beast in the MiG-15bis, and one who will intimidate the battlefield for time and time to come. And so if you think I have been too harsh or not harsh enough on bloody Violin, why do you not let me know in the comments section below? And at the same time, if you would like to submit a replay to the channel for me to just take a look at, or perhaps to actually feature on the channel, please refer to the description below the video for details on how you may submit the video. In the meantime, thank you all for watching, and if you did enjoy the video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck in the skies.